Oops. Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, we continue with day 3 of a very special week of shows co-hosted by Dr. Columbus Batiste in honor of Black History Month. But in addition to February being Black History Month, it's also Healthy Heart Month. And we have for you today, not one, but 2 plant-based cardiologists, and we're going to have a heart-to-heart. So please welcome back Dr. Batiste.
Right. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much. How many cardiologists does it take to screw in the light bulb, right? That's the proverbial question. It's going to take us all.
Yeah.
So I should reframe and say, how many cardiologists does it take to change the direction of healthcare delivery inside the United States? And I think it begins with one, the power of one. And that one is you, Dr. Montgomery. Welcome. We love you. Thank you for all the work that you do. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you with us tonight.
It was a pleasure and honor to be with you, Dr. Batiste. It's always a pleasure to visit with you and talk with you and come on and share thoughts and ideas. So I look forward to this evening.
Yeah, it's become my theme now, back-to-back nights. We kicked it off with Dr. Milton Mills. We had, then we had John Lewis and Jasmine Leyva on last night. And so each night we're building on this incredible guest line. And it all starts with Chef AJ. So I have to always pay homage to her allowing me to kind of come on this show and to share the platform with her. And like I said before, for those of you who maybe are tuning into this, your first show, because you follow Dr. Montgomery religiously, so you had to tune in tonight. Chef AJ is an incredible woman. And so I met her many years ago, right? She was probably about 5 at that time because she still looks like about 15. And she forever has been incredible with me. She's always encouraged me and said, hey, listen, you need to get out there. You need to, just be a force. You need to use your voice. And so I really recognize her for spurring me on to really feel comfortable having discussions with my patients, having discussions outside of the realm of clinic. And so all that stuff behind me. Thank you, Chef AJ. Appreciate you. Much love on this Heart Healthy Month.
I'm so glad to have both of you here. I mean, I go way back with Dr. Montgomery. He's I remember when he was just a toddler, I hired him to come speak at a conference with Dr. Terry Mason. And those two together were just wonderful.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Montgomery, you're doing big things out there, but I have to ask you, because this is African-American Black History Month. It is our month as cardiologists, Heart Month. I want to know if you could go back into time and you could interview, meet, sit down for a cup of tea, a cup of wild green leafy vegetables with any historical figure, who would you sit down with?
You're supposed to start off with the softball questions.
Oh, man, come on now.
There's so many people, my goodness. It's interesting because, you can go back to antiquity, meet with, Egyptian kings, or you can go back into our recent history and think of some of the more popular leaders. The interesting thing is, let me just put it this way. In this day, I'm going to choose somebody who is very well known in the minds of people. And so we can talk about the late Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. And the reason I chose him, because there are many people I can choose, Malcolm X, I can choose a lot of people who were very impactful, not only in the history of Americans of African descent, but in the world history, the history of this country and the world. And he's one of those people. But the reason I chose him is because he's one name that can just, pop off the minds of most people. So from the standpoint of, recent memory, popularity, I'll choose him. And so then the other part of your question is, what conversation would I have, or what would I try to convey to him? And knowing what I know now, one thing I would try to convey to him, among other things, the economic reasons, things that you can convey would be to fight more for economic independence in our community, first and foremost. And also, we should fight for health and well-being independence. And health independence, and I'll describe it that way, is one that's very important. And those two actually intertwine. And people often say your health is your wealth, and vice versa. Economic independence is something that, I don't think we fought for at the time. We were fighting for social justice, and there's nothing wrong with social justice, but I think the precursor to social justice is economic independence. And a precursor to economic independence, or at least a co-supporting effect, is also health independence. So for instance, if you are an individual, or maybe you are a family where you have a large economic well-being, great amount of wealth in terms of capital, buildings, and the like, but your health is very poor, then that's going to eat away at your ability to manage that wealth. It's going to eat away at your ability to pass on that wealth. It's going to eat away at your ability to enjoy the wealth. And wisdom is probably the most important thing that we can pass down in terms of legacy. So I can have, buildings and trust funds and the like, but to be a clear and sound mind and strong body into my elder years, to pass that wisdom on to my young people is an important part of passing down, an important part of securing the legacy. So economic independence and health independence, I think, go hand in hand. And so to have that conversation, those would be the two things that I would try to convey, that we would push for in our community.
Love it. Well, this doctor right here, you just, you acknowledge why I say that electrophysiologists are some of the smartest cardiologists out there, because you jump right in. I'm a piggyback on that. And
Sure.
What I'll add to it is the fact that I believe just like what you're saying. And how I will rephrase is the fact that health is the coefficient towards a healthy community. It's the most important coefficient, the variable that's necessary. And you outlined it, because if I'm a 40, 50, 30-year-old man or woman, and I get struck by illness that now impairs my ability to work, my financial situation, it dovetails. That's and right. Now that what that does, that impacts my whole entire family.
That's right.
And now if my life is shortened, that now my ability to receive some of the retirement dissipates. It goes away. Right. And so now, once again, it impacts the wealth of my family, the wealth building years during the midlife, as well as reaping the benefits from your efforts. And so this is some of the things that disparities really shine a light on, is that when you have individuals inside the country that live sicker and die sooner because of stark health disparities, we're going to jump in there. I was going to bring this up a bit later on, and Jack did a wonderful. So for those of you who aren't aware, there is what's I describe as the Bible, no offense to anyone, of cardiology in terms of journals. It's the Journal of American College of Cardiology. It's our grandfather, it's a grandpoobah, that so to speak. And they did a phenomenal focused seminar on race in cardiovascular disease this past December. And it was wonderfully well written, taking a course through hypertension, through arrhythmias, through heart failure, through structural heart disease. And it wasn't something that was looking specifically at African Americans compared to others. It was comparing all racial groups, Asian and Caucasian and African Americans, and looking and seeing what the health outcomes were. And they pointed to many of the things that Dr. Montgomery just alluded to. I don't know. Tell me about your thoughts about that series. Anything that really jumped out?
Yeah, I didn't read that series, but I can imagine what it published. But what I'm going to comment on race and cardiovascular disease from what I know. But to piggyback on your comments, I agree with exactly what you're saying. And it's oftentimes people will come and say, when I talk about lifestyle change, well, I've got to die of something. And that's true. We're all going to die of something. You shouldn't be dying at 40 on an average basis, but that's another story. In addition to what you're saying, is the morbidity, because let's get you struck with an illness at 40, like I say, you become disabled. Let's say you live to 60, 70, or 80 or 90, but you're in a nursing home, you're cognitively decline, you're physically declined. So the wisdom that could be passed on is not being passed on. So that's a major impact. And cardiovascular disease affects, the Black community tremendously. We talk about, again, social justice and these types of things, and in all due respect to the people who are fighting that front, voting rights, who are fighting the front in terms of issues related to police brutality, et cetera. But the number one thing that kills adult Black men and women is lifestyle-related diseases. And it starts with heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and the like. So for adults who pass through adulthood, get past the womb, some people argue abortion is number one, but once we get past the womb and we're in adulthood, then the number one threat to us is our lifestyle. And it starts at these lifestyle, diseases. And so cardiovascular disease being number one, cancer being right a close second. And diabetes feeding into both, because it's a metabolic disease that, predisposes to cardiovascular disease. Don't forget, end-stage renal disease, where, we're all familiar with the dialysis centers on perhaps every other street corner, disproportionate in our neighborhoods, which is next to the fast food joints, fried food this and fried food that, these joints that are disproportionate in our neighborhoods. And so we have to, I think, wake up and step back and examine, our lifestyle and start to make definitive changes to turn this ship around.
Yeah, I love it. It's good to have like minds on the conversation, because I'm gonna tell you, here's the thing. And for those of you out there who are listening and tuning in who may not be of African descent, the problem that faces the African-American community is the same problem that faces all communities. When we look globally, America as a whole is living sicker and dying soon. We have some of the worst outcomes as it relates to ischemic heart disease, as it relates to chronic disease burden compared to other economically countries out there. We trail miserably despite having some of the best minds, the best technology, and the best access to therapy worldwide. And so there is, at the root cause, there is a problem that still persists. And that's some of the stuff that you just brought out that I absolutely agree with. Now, so what'd you have for breakfast this morning?
Interestingly enough, my breakfast was a salad. So I do a number of eating routines, and we have our patients follow them. And I follow time restricted eating. So my breakfast started at, I didn't start until 1. I usually try to start around 11 or noon. And I'll eat, for this month, I've been eating for a 2-hour period. Now, typically I'll eat from 11 to 5 when I'm not on a special detox, but recently I've been doing from either 11 to 1 or noon to 2. And sometimes if it's later, it'll be 1 to 3 or 2 to 4, something like that. So most of my breakfast meals are salads. And I'll start with, before the breakfast meal, it's water. I'll start with a bitter herb. I started with neem powder, 1/4 teaspoon of neem, and about 4 or 5 ounces of hot water, neem leaf, and then neem bark. And then I usually do a shot of cold pressed turmeric root, and then a blue-green algae. So I'll start with those with water. And then my first meal usually is around the noon hour. Today it was a rough day today, so I didn't start until maybe about 1:30, something like that. But it was a salad, and so we do a raw detox salad. Our restaurant that's on site prepared it, and we actually recently we have converted, and let me just put it in the present tense. We're converting our kitchen to local, sustainably grown / organically grown produce. And so it's a process. We currently work with our local growers. We're going to have to work on a seasonal rotation and things like that. So we're actually working on that, where we have green sprouts. Right now, all of our greens are from local growers, and then we're getting to where we're going to start. Our root vegetables will be next. And so, but yeah, that was my breakfast this morning. How about you?
So, well, wait a minute. You can't just run past stuff. First of all, you drop some knowledge and science here. You brought up time restricted feeding. You started talking about bitter herbs and turmeric and blue algae, and then you jump to the fact that your medical practice has a restaurant and now a farm attached to it. So we're gonna have to rewind and kind of hit some of this stuff. So tell us.
Can we say gloss over?
Yeah, I mean, come on now. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. So tell me,
No problem.
tell me about why your breakfast was the way. Tell me what those things are doing for you in terms of your health and wellness.
Yeah, it's a great point. So I'm going to back up a little bit and kind of give our perspective, because we, in our practice, and as you know, Dr. Columbus, and I'll share with the audience, we do, I'm a cardiologist, cardiac electrophysiologist. I started off I've been 25 years in my private practice, and we started off treating, very acutely ill patients, heart attack. People in our office, we get the spectrum of people who come in for just wellness checks, et cetera, to somebody who drops dead in the lobby. That's our spectrum of disease in our office. So, we may do CPR or emergency shots or IV infusion, or people just wellness checks. So that's the spectrum. And of course, with the most ill patients who are trying to change their lives, we have to take a more aggressive nutritional intervention. So although there are many people online who are, in the plant-based community, and I understand that, our approach is more a manipulation of food and a use of food in a target fashion to actually help reverse disease and halt disease. So having said that, among the approaches that we use raw nutritional detoxes. We use superfoods like algae and things like spirulina. We use bitter herbs, and we use intermittent fasting. Now, there are fasting clinics, many of you are aware of it, True North, who use extended fast, and we do some of that, but we don't do extended fasting in the short term. But we do time-restricted eating, where we'll have someone eating at where they'll do, we actually have prescriptions for this, 4-hour feasting and 24 hours of fasting, part of that sleep, the other part awake and drinking. During some of that fasting, we may have them have bitter herbs and superfoods, and these things have positive effects on the digestive system. They can get rid of, parasites and other, unwanted bacteria to help the microbiome stabilize and normalize itself. We also have an infrared sauna chamber in our office, and we use infrared sauna therapy. So there are other, therapy. So, but back to the nutritional side, the intermittent fasting is where the body heals itself the most. And so, it allows the body to rebuild, repair, and so on. So the more we have those hours, then the better. Now, during the feasting time, oftentimes people do time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting, but they'll eat junk during the feasting time. So it's sort of like getting the manicure, pedicure, every day of the week, and then shooting yourself in the hands and the feet on the last day of the month or something like that. You kind of destroy the benefits of what you've done all month. So in the feasting is important. So we have a food classification system where they will eat mostly raw, but there's some dehydrated raw, which may be level 4B. But the point is that we will follow patients closely, and while they're on one of these detoxes, we will wean their medications and the like. We then have them on exercise regimen and a number of other things. We will use this in patients who are outpatient, but we also use it in our inpatient. So I had a patient who recently went in, had to have a kidney resection, an nephrectomy done. She had cancer in the kidney. She's 88 years old. And the patient, we put her through a detox for 30 days prior to going in the hospital. Raw fruits and vegetables only. We followed, did infrared sauna therapy. We minimized the medications. Now, she had a few slip-ups here and there, but she did extremely well. When she went to surgery, I had her raw food. Her son's got, food from our nutrition center. And she went into surgery, came out, no problems, awake. She's on day 2, pain-free, et cetera, at an advanced age. Now, I'm not saying that couldn't have happened without the nutritional detox, but what we see, typically is when patients are metabolically cleansed, then, they tolerate needed surgery much better if not. So in summary, what I'm doing is what I tend to prescribe, because it's, again, part of my health regimen, as well as what I recommend for the patients. And oftentimes I'll try these detox regimens so that I understand how it works. And I'm counseling a patient. I have firsthand knowledge of how it works.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Wonderful. That's powerful. So, I mean, obviously those out there listening can know they can learn something by going to your website and looking you up online to try and get like a consultation. But, I have to ask, right? So African-American cardiologist is somewhat of of a unicorn as it stands. So how was it transitioning from being your standard high esteemed electrophysiologist, which you still are, to being one who ascribes to nutrition and to nutritional therapies? And you were doing this before this took off mainstream. Yeah, before when it was still seen as fringe, and so to speak, and it's becoming more in the mainstream now.
Yeah, that's an amazing question because, and oftentimes when I try to answer that question, I reflect and it's like, wow, it's really as though God was sort of carrying me through this process, if you will. Thinking back, my first inkling of having a notion of wanting to do anything remotely, related to this was during my training. I had an interest in wellness, quote unquote. I mean, even though I was trained to do EP, doing ablations and implanting devices, and I did that for over 2 decades, pulmonary vein isolation, both parts of wide ablation, defibrillator implants, and so on, heart caths and the like. I enjoyed those things. I enjoyed scrubbing and going in and taking care of the patient. But in the back of my mind, I had an interest in wellness, and I didn't initially know what that meant necessarily. However, in the process of running my practice and whatnot, I remember seeing in one occasion a patient came in, was on lots of supplements, these herbs and things. And I said, well, where'd you get that? He said, well, I got it from my herbalist. And I said, well, what is all that about? And so I got in the car with my then nurse practitioner. We drove over to the herbalist, made an appointment, met with her, and just started asking a bunch of questions. And so that was an introduction into this whole pathway of doing something other than the traditional medicine.
How many years in practice were you at that time?
Oh, gosh. So, I was probably 6 years in.
Okay.
Let's see here. 97, 4. No, I was, about 4 years in.
Wow.
So I was 4 years in. 3 to 4 years in, something like that. And so anyway, we met with her and we started doing some of this stuff. And then, and that was around 2001, sometime in the neighborhood of 2001. Because I remember my mom had taken ill at that time, and her illness had progressed between 2001 and she died in 2002. And I remember applying some of those things during her time of illness. Now, I had not discovered, quote unquote, plant-based nutrition at the time, but I was, intrigued with this whole alternative approach with herbs and the like. And the herbalist wasn't plant-based. She, recommended maybe a keto diet. I don't remember the details, but again, there was something else out there. And I started reading lay books and the like. My mom's death was impactful on me because I saw after analyzing her death, she died of liver failure. And it was the polypharmacy that I recognized that contributed to that. And the way her liver failed, it was she didn't have abnormal, she was followed by a gastroenterologist for years for different GI issues, but never had any abnormal liver function test. But she was developing fatty liver, unbeknownst to, the gastroenterologist or any of us, largely because she was on maybe anywhere from 8 to 10 medications at any given time, most of which were, metabolized through the liver. That plus, she's on the diabetic diet, quote unquote, which was essentially another version of the standard American diet with, preservatives, chemicals, processed animal protein, et cetera, which also had to be metabolized through the liver. So recognizing that approach, and she had coronary disease, we put a stent in, cleared her for surgery, went through that. She went through the surgery great. So the allopathic medicine, which worked on the surface, did a great job, but it didn't really heal the underlying problem. So understanding that and realizing that, reflecting back on that, and it was after her death, I then received and Chef AJ would like this, a flyer to take a crash course, and I became a certified raw vegan chef. And a local vegan advocate in the community was hosting. She had invited a raw vegan chef in. And so she did this 2-day, Saturday, Sunday crash course. And so I took it, and it was a great crash course. And I got resources on different people in the community, one of whom was a guy that coached people on juice feasts, named John Rose. And so after the course, and they talked about plant-based nutrition, this is pretty interesting stuff. I met with this guy, John Rose, and we met at a Whole Foods. We talked for like, I don't know, 6 hours. It's ridiculous. The guy knew seemingly everything about food, strictly plant-based, raw detox. So he had a program where he would coach us on juice feasts. So I went on the juice feast coaching. So I did that for 33 days. I was raw juice, nothing to eat, etc. I felt amazing.
Yeah. I did 26.
So, all right. Congrats. And so it was amazing. And I said, wow, this is plant-based nutrition is something I can do this. So I went vegan after that. But, typically I eat vegan junk food off and on. Every day I do a juice feast. I feel amazing. And so as I went through that process, so I should say the early phase of my journey, I realized that all vegan foods weren't the same. I also started applying these things to my very sick patients. I mean, I'm seeing very sick patients. One lady came to mind, she was a diabetic, multivessel coronary disease, had a 4-vessel bypass, ejection fraction 10%. She'd had stents since the bypass. She came in the office. She was on 21 medications, a wheelchair, oxygen, bad knees. And so I saw him. I said, well, what am I going to do that? Medication 22, 23. So I asked him, do you have a juicer? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, for the next 10 days, I want you to stop eating. And I wrote down juice recipes. I want you to drink these juices. And so after that, she came back in. She had gone off her insulin and reduced other medications because the blood pressure was going down. But she came in walking, talking, laughing, no oxygen, no wheelchair, feeling great. That's in 10 days. Now, the Book of Daniel, suffer me 10 days, pulse and water. So the point is that I saw this approach work time and again, 100% of the time when it was followed. Not 99.999%. When they followed it, 100% of the patients got remarkable improvement by following this regimen, not in 6 months, but 7 to 10 days. And at that point in time, so this is around 2003-ish, at that point in time, I said that I cannot not figure out how to integrate this in my business. I had no clue as to how I was going to really do it. It was cumbersome. I was writing down recipes and things, and I'd type out a week's worth of food, 2 weeks worth of food. I'd save it and repurpose it. But I said in the back of my mind, I'm going to figure out how to integrate this in my program. And over time, the news media picked up, and one thing led to another. We started having boot camp classes, and people started saying, look, we like the recipe, want to buy the food. Then we had to do a restaurant with the repurpose our building. So it became a cascade of events that led us down this pathway. But it was a passion, because I saw, and you know how it is. You look at a patient's eyes who's done better, who you've life's impact, and you just say, look, I have to figure out how to make this work. And so it's just been, this has been what's waking me up every day with enthusiasm to go out and figure out how to improve upon what we're doing to help positively impact people's lives.
Love it. I can relate to so much of what you said already, with the nidus, the spur of a family member going through illness and suffering, and really kind of causing you to seek additional information and so forth, and being open and receptive in accordance with other aspects of your personality and your desire even prior to that time, and then applying it to your patients. And I have to applaud you, right? Because for those of you out there who don't know, medicine is a very regimented field, and it's really based upon referrals, and in certain sectors, it can be very ruthless in terms of regimen and going back into what standard of practice and where's the evidence for this. And so the issue is that many individuals, as we all know, and it's been said time and time again, are unfamiliar with the extraordinarily large amount of research and evidence of which Dr. Montgomery himself has contributed to, right? The body of knowledge and the evidence out there. So definitely want to applaud you. And it's not an easy transition, but I'm so thankful that you did it.
Now, thanks for your kind words and comments. And you mentioned the word evidence, and I don't want to beat up on the medical community too much, but I have to at least make a few comments in that regard, because I think you touched on some things that are, I think, very important. And I think it's important for us to be open and honest with our audience. And I'll have to say, and I'm a part of the whole community, so I can speak on behalf of, it's almost self-criticism, because I'm part of the community that I'm talking. And in all due respect to my many colleagues and physicians who are working hard, doing the best for the patients, one, our training is, I wouldn't call it an education. I wouldn't call it a medical education, not even a medical training, but more so a medical indoctrination. And it's an unfortunate thing, because we industry, drug industry, device industries, and perhaps other industries, maybe the food industry is there because they're serving all these lunches to us, but there are industries that have really compromised our profession in a way that I didn't really have my eyes open to early on until recently, and my journey through optimal health, personal optimal health, and also with my patients and my practice revision has opened my eyes to this more so than ever. And you mentioned how regimented it is. We have guidelines, and there are physicians who only go by the guidelines, which is almost like it's a food recipe, a cookbook recipe. 2 cups of this, 3 cups of that, nothing beyond that. And medicine should be practiced in a much more different way. That's one. Two, we talk about evidence-based medicine. You say, well, what is the evidence? And you just mentioned there's so much evidence that supports a plant-based lifestyle, evidence that support other lifestyle, exercise, fresh air, sleep, etc. And these things are not front and center in what we prescribe for our patients, largely because the so-called evidence that we follow is the evidence that the evidence that makes it to our guidelines, the evidence that's directed by industry that says that, oh yeah, diet and exercise, just give them a handout. But when that doesn't work, we know that doesn't work because they're addicted to certain foods. And you're not addressing those things. When that doesn't work, then you have to put them on this regimen of pills or this recommendation of devices or the like. And we have no way of thinking about something outside of that, because our training is strictly related to that. Our guidelines are related to that, and our standard of care is related to that. And standard of care, community standard of care, is what, to some extent, protects you from a liability standpoint. And so it's a very unfortunate situation, because many people are in a situation where they have to see a doctor like yourself and myself, and they need to, upon seeing that doctor, be in a situation where that doctor's saying, okay, yeah, take this pill and take that pill, but you need to be on a raw detox. You need to be 100% plant-based. You need to have, time-restricted eating. You have to this, in addition to that prescription, so that the pharmaceutical things are only transitional prescriptions, and the long-term prescription are lifestyle, where we try to lead people through an optimal journey.
Yes. I mean, just, when I listen to you and you talk about even the lifestyle, and it is recommended inside the guidelines, oh, they should consider lifestyle. There's no true intention, because there's no SMART goals. There's no specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based type of recommendations. There's not even a statement typically as it relates to send a referral to your colleagues and healthcare providers that are dietitians or lifestyle coaches or whatever it may be. And the way I characterize our system, our medical system, is very similar but slightly different. Is that there's a saying that I say when I'm on the slave food platform and on the discussion, we say that resources go where value is placed. Resources go where value is placed, and we speak about that in the context of disparate communities, often communities of color. But let's apply that to the field of medicine. Resources go where value is placed. So what becomes important in medical school? passing your USMLE, right? And so what's tested on your USMLE? Certainly not nutrition, certainly not lifestyle. It's pathophys and pharmacology, right? So then you need to go ahead and you need to pass you want to get into residency. You're in residency now, right? And so what are you tested in order to become board certified when you exit? Once again, the focus is on pills and procedures. And so that is where resources go, because that is what's valued. Now, many providers, now they have developed this vantage point, this perspective, this angle into what is real versus what isn't. Now we enter into practicing what we've built our knowledge base on. And now the reimbursement likewise is based upon what? Primarily, right? It's still based upon procedures, your prescriptions, which are denote your quality that you're rendering as well. And that's what guides your medical centers and everything of that sort. And so we need a change in the value system. That's what's lacking in this country. That's what's lacking in the health industry, is where our value is being placed, and hence the resources are not going there. And it's taking individuals like yourself who are documenting the outcomes, and that, yes, indeed, there is value. There is value when you go through this, and it's much more cost efficient value, because now I'm able to do it without the exorbitant costs of the pharmaceuticals or the repeated hospitalizations, by doing the basics of exercise and breathing air and eating fresh food, and not exclusively, but in concert with the medications, because there's not one size that fits all.
Right. That's exactly right. And the whole, like I say, lifestyle, the recommendations are very minimal. For instance, in our clinic, when a patient comes in, we do our standard cardiac evaluation, the biomarkers, we do cardiovascular testing. If they need to be hospitalized, we manage them in the hospital. But when we started lifestyle intervention, we have a special clinic. It's Wednesdays. It's the integrated care clinic. And in that clinic, that's where we start the details of the lifestyle. We have our integrated care coordinator call them ahead of time, explain what the clinic's about. And when we talk about raw food, we have a sample platter of the food that they're tasting. So they're actually tasting food as we talk about what they're going to eat, how they're going to have it, what they can prepare, their recipes. There's a detailed regimen they follow. They start a detox regimen. We see our patients as frequently as, well, actually as frequent as daily, but minimally weekly on the detox. And we're adjusting medications and the like. We have a digital health clinic where patients are followed up through phone calls and the like. So this lifestyle intervention is one, and we also have online programs where they can healthy lifestyle series. In fact, that's going on right now. They probably just finished a healthy lifestyle series. We have a group of people and we're coaching them through a whole process of detox, and we're educating them in terms of food procurement and the science behind that and the food industry. So it's a process where we carry people through a journey, and we're working on a private social media platform that's going to launch it in this month, that we help people through a lifestyle journey. It's not just hand them a pamphlet, say, eat this and don't eat that, cut your salt, blah, blah, blah. It's, people are addicted to foods and so on. So we walk, and everybody's journey is different based on what's going on in their lives, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a daunting process, but it's one that could be very effective. We've seen many people conquer these elements and bring great quality to their lives over the years that we've done this. And if you, a little organization like us, we're 4 miles south of the world's largest medical center. We have a 1 acre, 1,500 square foot building, and we're in the shadow. I refer to them as they're Goliath and we're David. And so if David can do this and have an impact on people's lives just with those minimal resources we have, just imagine if Goliath had the will to do this, how many lives can be changed and be converted. But it's not a lack of ability, but a lack of will. We found people at every socioeconomic walk of life who are able to follow this. People on fixed income, on food stamps, and all of that stuff, and they're able to follow this regimen that we recommend. So
you mean it's about a person's desire more so than their resources?
Yeah. See, people's inability to do something frequently is not due to the lack of resources, but the lack of resourcefulness. I'll give an example. A patient, relatively young, early 50s, et cetera, had congenital heart issues. And I initially saw she needed a pacemaker change, but had not been checked in 20 years. And so I went in, and it was when I was still doing procedures, her wires were broken. It was a mess. I had to put a pacemaker, permanent pacemaker lead up from the groin and attach it in across a stenosis tricuspid valve. And I had to put a molar catheter.
That sounds
across
fun.
it. Yeah, exactly. It was a several-hour procedure for just a simple generator change. I had to get the CV surgeon after I put that in, because she was pacemaker dependent. She went flatline and had alligator clips. So I couldn't let her leave the cath lab until I put that in there. And I screwed it in from the leg and all that. So I had to get a rep to bring it. So anyway, that was the scenario. But she had liver issues regarding the tricuspid stenosis and the bleeding diaphysis, and a big mess. And so, again, she's from a situation, food stamps, et cetera, didn't really understand what was going on. But I constantly preached the message. We need fruits and vegetables only, fruits and vegetables only, fruits and vegetables only. Never gave up on it. Right now, she is virtually 100% plant-based, feeling better, doing better. Her daughter actually was already leaning in that direction, is already having that. Now, they don't get food from our center because we're trying to get accepted for SNAP. The USDA government just denied our SNAP application because we don't sell dead animal flesh. And, PCM was helping us with that, and the lawyers helped us. And, they said they're exceptions, but despite our appeal, we got a recent denial. So we're working on that. But long story short, despite that, she's following that regimen. She's doing better. Her life is much better. And there's an integrated approach. And we have other people who are doing just as well. It's just a matter of, okay, what can I do with what I have and where I am? Because I'm determined to make this work. And all we're doing is just pushing and pushing, fruits and vegetables only, fruits and vegetables only, fruits and vegetables only. And not a bite, not a drop, not a crumb. We reinforce that. And the more they do it, the better they feel. The better they feel, the more they do it. And so it's really a matter of getting the mind right. I don't care what sort of resources you have. If you say I can't do it, then you're going to be right. Okay? If you say I can do it, I've had patients that have come in and say, look, I say, well, what budget, what's your weekly food budget? Well, my budget is, $30 a week. I said, I'll tell you what, you go to the produce, I'm gonna write you this prescription, raw fruits and vegetables, this is for your cardiologist. You go to the produce manager of Whole Foods, you go to Sprouts and all these other places, and I want you to negotiate. Don't negotiate for $30. I want you to negotiate produce for $5 a week. You start at $5, work them up to 10 or 15. If you get it at 15, you got 15 left. And you make it happen. And they come back and say, I made it happen. So what we have to do is, instead of saying, well, these people are poor, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can do a whole lot more than we really give them credit for doing. People are very, very resourceful in areas that they see is valuable. But we need to say, look, it is very valuable for you to nourish your body in a certain way. Once they understand, as you alluded to earlier, it's always a value proposition. And as individuals, we make value proposition regardless of what our socioeconomic side. We make that all the time. We have to. So once we say this is a prime value, and whatever that value is, do you want to see your grandkid grow up? Do you want to see this with that? Oh, yes. Then here's why this is important. Once we've implanted that in their mind, and then they've gotten the wherewithal, and then they've gotten some early success, and then some more success, then there's an encouragement of pushing more and more in that direction. And I've seen amazing things happen. I don't care what the person's age. I don't care what their socioeconomic status. I don't give any sourness to anybody. You're in the office, you can make this happen.
That's right. That's right. I love it. I've seen it as well. So tell me, what do you think, is there an importance in having diversity within cardiology for treating patients in a diverse community? Is there a benefit to that at all?
I'm sorry, when you say diversity, what do you mean diversity in terms
So
of
in other words, having African-American physicians, having female physicians to treating communities that are diverse. You may have African-American communities predominantly or Hispanic and so forth. Is there a value or benefit in that?
I think there is, at least, patients say there is. I mean, from what patients convey to me, they say, it's beneficial to see a doctor that looks like me. There's a certain comfort level. So certainly patients have conveyed that to me. So I definitely, from what I've had patients express to me, that seems to be an important thing from patients' perspective, from what has been expressed to me. From my perspective, I think it's important, but I just want to have doctors who are caring for the patients first and foremost, because that's going to be the most important thing if you have a doctor who's caring for that patient, and regardless of their walk of life. And so if a doctor is truly caring for that patient, they could be from any walk of life. That's going to be the key, because having a caring, thoughtful physician or practitioner, if you will, is going to be someone that is going to be most important. So yes, diversity, I think, is important. There's a perception aspect to that, and I think that's important. But I think equally important is to have more physicians who are really caring for the patients, and not just following a regimen. Because, you could be a physician of African descent who can be just checking boxes just like the next person and just filling prescriptions. And that may not be helping, these patients. So I want to make sure that, yes, diversity is important, but also caring physicians and one who are actually, looking after the patient. When a patient comes in and says, well, doctor, what about this natural substance? Because patients are wanting to find natural ways. And people on 15 medication got side effects. It doesn't take, an MD degree to know that, hey, I don't feel right on this. I need to do something different. And patients are coming and asking, there's more information available to them, do this herb, this root, and they go and ask the doc, says, well, that doesn't work, or I don't know anything about that. They're disappointed because they want us to be on board with that. Now, having said that, we want to be careful and cautious. And that's why in our approach, we have a foundational approach to things. Optimal lifestyle, we'll help you supplement different things, and we will work with you in terms of weaning these medications, and we're going to be supportive. But again, back to your question, yes, diversity I think is beneficial. Patients recognize that, but I also want to add that I want physicians who are caring for their patients and who are not just pushing the industry narrative, pills and procedures, but rather pushing for the patient's better health and well-being.
Absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, love, caring are the things that trump everything else, because if you exude love and caring to your patients as best as you can, you're going to seek to understand them. You're going to seek to understand their circumstances, where they live, where they play, where they pray, where they die, all these things that play a role in their total health, to give a perspective. When you're not caring, you have your agenda and your agenda only, to get through the boxes, check the boxes. And that's what becomes important. On the converse, I agree with you in terms of the aspect of, and not to have like a party of agreement, but when it
I'm okay with that. After a day like today.
Yeah, I understand those days for sure.
Yep.
When it comes to sometimes having someone that reflects you, that looks like you assume that they're going to connect with you at a different level and recognize certain aspects. There is a certain level of power, if power, and I shouldn't say power, but connectivity, right? In the immediate connectivity, that shared experiences, whether or not I can reflect on whether or not it's a barbershop experience, or whether I can connect on the church experience, or I can connect on various things that may be common, although shared experiences, although not uniform. And that carries a lot of weight. And there are some small studies that really validate the effect that I think across the board, at the core, we all as providers need to be caring, and that includes myself. Every day I make every effort, and I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect with my family. I'm not perfect in the world at all. I'm not perfect with my patients, but every day I wake up, I'm trying to be better than I was the day before in the care and concern. So
that's right. Now that makes sense, and it's important. And one thing we try to do, I have a great staff that truly supports me. I have a cardiac nurse who's African American. I have a physician assistant who's Caucasian, and they are just beautiful people, and our patients love them. My physician assistant, there was a patient we had who he was dying of liver cancer, and we'd been working with him in certain ways, and he was near his final days, and we were actually going to his house. We started some IV vitamin C at his house, and we were hydrating him and things like that. He didn't live far, and my nurse and I were going there, and he died. The day he died, his wife called, and she was trying to bring him in, and she called back and said, well, he's not breathing, he's died. So I went over to the house and pronounced him. I prayed with her, and there was a caretaker there and some other people, so we prayed. And then when I called my physician assistant, she had another appointment that she was leaving the office. She said, well, no, I want to go there. And I gave her the address. And so she came and met the family. So we were there with them. Now, we don't have the ability to do that with every patient. That's just an example of how that caring is there. And she and our patients love her, the ones that she follows primarily. She'll be on the phone calling me, calling them. So and it's a passion. It's something that, I'm not able to teach that or, buy that. It just comes within, and that's the kind of passion we all need, and that's something we're trying to create from an atmospheric standpoint in our practice. As we bring people on, that's going to be something that I'm going to convey to every other medical professional who's helping training patients. We want you to develop a compassion for helping the patients get better. And that's something that, we think is really important. When I'm seeing patients, sometimes, one problem we have in our clinic, sometimes the wait gets a little long, and I'm not going to talk about that too much, but anyway.
I hear you.
But part of the issue is that I'll be in a room with a patient, and, I'm talking about personal issues. They're talking about this. And so, well, what about that? And they're telling me personal things about their lives. And I was sharing this concept with my medical assistants who, are the eyes and ears of our digital health clinic. I said, look, one of the medical assistants, well, what questions we ask the patient month after month? I said, well, look, one, you need to get to know the patient. So that phone call is a phone call where you're connecting with somebody whom they know you, and there's an interaction. It's a human interaction. So it's not just a list of questions, but a human interaction. How are you doing? There's one patient of mine, he plays pickleball. I said, well, how's the pickleball game going? And so on and so forth and so on. And we'll laugh about different things and frequently. I think 95% of the time, maybe more, I walk out of the room with a patient, there's something we're laughing about. And that in and of itself is therapy.
Yes, it is.
That in of itself is therapy. And so you make that office visit a human experience. And one thing, it finally sunk, because early in my career, I was just seeing patients, and I'm saying, and you can identify with that. You're going through the day, you're working. Okay, you got left bundle branch block, and EF is low. You're going to need a BIV, blah 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 blah. Boom. You need blah 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 blah. Boom. And so this is your work. But then on the other side of that conversation is somebody who's afraid for their lives.
Yes.
One, they're afraid to walk in your office because you have to see a cardiologist. Then the cardiologist say you need this, this, and this. And so I started to realize that, wait a minute, I need to create a process. Our building, we changed the way the look of the office is, a little more homey feeling. So the point is that we try to make it a human experience, and that caring goes from the standpoint of reassuring the patient. I'm always upbeat and positive. I don't care how dire the situation. Yeah, this is going on, but here's our plan, and I think we're going to do this, and I think you're going to be better. We don't make promise guarantees. Nobody can. But I always give them upbeat and give the positive side of every story. And I think it really helps people, because it's really a human experience, and it makes the care better. It makes their overall well-being, enhances their overall well-being, and I think it improves outcomes.
Love it. It's incredible what you're doing, and just it's encouraging to hear other providers out there who are really into it for the patients and for trying to make people better. And so once again, I do applaud you. I appreciate you. You are a valued source in the community. And Texas, where are you at in Texas? You're in Houston, right?
Houston, yes, sir.
Houston. I'm sorry about your Texans and all the other sports places out there, but other than at least you're the shining gem. You're the shining gem in Houston.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I don't know where our quarterback is going. I didn't follow a single football game all year, so I don't know where Deshaun Watson's going. I used to be a sports fan. Where is he going?
I have no idea. I haven't heard much about him all year. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm a Cowboys fan. So you see that right here? Take a look. You see that right there? That's Dallas Cowboys now.
Now wait a minute. Now wait, time out. Now the Los Angeles Rams are in the Super Bowl, and you live in Los Angeles, and you're on the air being a Cowboys fan. They should remove you from the city.
Dr. Montgomery, here's the thing, sir. I'm an American, right? I'm an American, and so I must support America's team at all costs, right?
Well,
when I say, hold on, wait. This last point, I was making this to a group of nurses here the other day, is the Cowboys reflect the American healthcare system. You have all this tremendous talent, you have all this tremendous resource, but yet we're fledgling as it relates to our health outcomes globally. All right, we're fledgling as it relates to our health outcomes within the states, and so we just need a change in leadership within this health industry here, and all of a sudden we will rise up again. And so we're very similar to that. So remember that, sir.
I'll remember that. I said I'm not much of a football fan, but the one thing I'm a fan of any team playing against the Dallas Cowboys. And I get a kick out of that. A good friend of mine, church member, he's a diehard Cowboys fan, and I don't follow much. I'll flip on the game, and I'll just look at it. And they had a good season. I mean, congratulations, you had a great season. And but anyway, I'd flip on the game, and if I've seen they lost, I'd say, well, how was the game? Something like that. But no,
I get that all the time via text messages. Trust me.
It's fun though. It's fun. But no, but Super Bowl's going to be there, right? Los Angeles.
It is. I won't be there, but it will be here.
yeah. But that'll be good. So, but
it's good stuff.
I'll be watching on TV also. But
I hope to watch. AJ, I know you had some. Did you have some questions? Because this phenomenal gentleman and physician and stellar man has been busy all day, and I do not want to wear out my welcome at all with him.
I'm just listening. This has been so much fun. Yes, I actually, if you don't mind, we do have a couple of doctor type questions specific for cardiologists.
Sure.
Here we go. Okay. This is from Susan. She wrote in advance. And I think it's a very good one because I think people don't understand why a whole food plant-based diet is so effective for both preventing and reversing heart disease. And she asks, what is the physiological mechanism by which a whole food plant-based diet releases unstable plaques in the arteries?
Yeah, so let me do something. So it's a great question. And do I have a share screen capability?
Yes. Let me enable it right now. Oops. Hold on.
And while you're doing that, one thing I want to emphasize is the following, that when you talk about cardiovascular disease from a standpoint of cardiovascular plaque, or you're talking about diabetes, you're talking about liver dysfunction, you talk about et cetera, there's an underlying biochemical physiological imbalance where where you have increased oxidative stress and you have inflammation. So if you look at these issues as foundation of illness, before you see a plaque in the artery, at the cellular level, you start to see a process of biochemical imbalance and inflammation that builds up. And so in a study that we've done in our patient population, we look at a fine plant-based diet utilized in an outpatient setting. And we saw, we reduced hypercholesterolemia and hypertension. And so, but we also measured a lot of different biomarkers. I'm going to kind of go through a few and highlight. So hemoglobin A1C, as you know, looks at the average blood glucose over about 3 months. And, if it's higher, then you've had an average high blood glucose. If it's lower, it's lower. We showed a significant reduction, about a 3.4% reduction in hemoglobin A1C in just 4 weeks, not 3 months, it's just 4 weeks. And you say, well, how does that? And so one thing is that the fluctuation of blood sugars, which is probably mostly contributed to by postprandial elevations, but blood sugar fluctuations also contribute to increase in hemoglobin A1C. And so I surmise that our intervention with nutrition reduced hemoglobin A1C by reducing these fluctuations. That's one. Two, C-reactive protein is a simple blood marker that we use to measure inflammation. And for almost 2 decades, we've been seeing a 30% reduction in hemoglobin A1, C-reactive protein. And here we showed in a publication where we saw a 30% reduction. I'll show some of these other numbers. Blood pressure was reduced, but this is an outward measurement. At the same time, we were reducing medications, inflammatory markers, Lp(a), inflammation. Lp(a) is really an inflammatory related atherogenic molecule, inflammation in general. We saw, in addition to weight loss, LDL, HDL cholesterol going down. This is 17% reduction in just 4 weeks. Total cholesterol, 16% reduction. Lp(a), 16% reduction. Most statin drugs don't affect lipoprotein(a). There are very few things that do affect lipoprotein(a). We were the first to show this in the medical literature using nutrition, a nutritional intervention. If you look at other things, as I said, C-reactive protein, a 30% reduction. This is only 4 weeks. This is not, but look at a cytokine, an important pleiotropic cytokine, IL-6. Many people know about cytokines based on people with COVID storm, cytokine storm from COVID disease. But we see the reduction in IL-6 by 23%. If you have elevated cytokines, you have elevated white kines, your immune system in disarray. These things are the underlying biochemistry that potentiates disease in general, atherosclerotic disease in particular. And so if you want to understand the biochemistry, you can look at these diseases and you can see how, I'm going to actually, hold on one second. I'm just going to share one screen here, a quick before and after, where a patient that went on our intervention. And so this is a patient, 46-year-old lady came in with, she had wanted to lose weight. So she went to a gastric bypass, wanted to do that to lose weight, but they did an EKG, it was abnormal. They said you need to see a cardiologist, came to see us. And she was having chest pain and abdominal EKG, and I was concerned about that. We did an echo, EF is about 24%, normal is 50% or greater. I took it to the cath lab, and my catheter's an angiogram, and my colleague sees this and understands this clearly. It's about a 90-95% osteo LAD lesion. They call this the widow maker. In this case, it could have been a widower maker. It wasn't amenable to plaque because this left main looks a little bit kind of small, and we think that was plaque there. My interventional colleague said, so we offered a single vessel bypass. She had already started the detox. So, well, I want to continue that. So we continued on detox, raw fruits and vegetables, and we followed for about 5.5 months. And this vessel opened up. And also the left main is bigger, reference to the catheter compared to here. And you see these vessels are a little bit bigger in diameter. So she had atherosclerotic plaque throughout here, but this is how the body healed itself. And those biochemical mechanisms that I showed you is playing out here in the clinical setting. Her ejection fraction, which was about 24% at baseline, this is a cardiac MRI, after just 5.5 months, nutrition alone, the EF went to 50%. So again, the mechanism starts at the cellular level where you, through nutrition, the food is working intracellularly in a way, in a complex way that we don't understand. When I give a medication, medication works on maybe 1 or 2 biochemical pathways. It may be doing something good over here, but maybe doing horrible things over here. The food is interacting with the human body the way it's designed to do so. And so the best explanation that I have for that, to answer that question, is that the mechanism, the biochemistry and physiology is at the cellular level. The things that we've identified as the most important is oxidative stress and inflammation. And when I'm treating a patient with heart disease, and a lady who was on hospice and she was on a melanon drip, EF is low, and we were getting ready to send her home to die. And she was crying and said, look, this is what we're going to do. I put on a raw green smoothies. Within a week, I weaned off the melanon. Her heart was strong enough. She went home. We got on more raw detox and she started doing better. Again, the same processes that I showed you in our studies was working there in her clinically, but it works at the cellular and subcellular level.
Oh, well, thank you. And she also had one other question, which was, she's 77. She had a heart attack 9 years ago. Is there any danger in getting a nuclear stress test?
Yeah, the word danger has certain connotations and things. I mean, just about everything we do has certain potential risk and benefits. And so, although I wouldn't use the word danger per se, you get an IV, could you get an infection? Sure. There's radiation and so on. There are benefits of nuclear stress tests. If you had a heart attack, there's defined disease. If there's a need for the cardiologist to evaluate where you are, whether it's based on evaluating symptoms or the like, then there's a benefit that outweigh the potential risk of doing it. So I don't like to use the word danger. So I'll answer no to that in the sense of it being dangerous. But is it useful and beneficial? I'll say it can be. It depends on the circumstances and what you're trying to accomplish.
She said she couldn't get her heart rate high enough on the regular stress test.
Yeah, and again, that could be because she's on a beta blocker. And when I evaluate patients, when I evaluate them on a regular stress test, and I understand we try to get, you get your 85% of the maximum, 220 minus your age times 85%. And I understand all that. But what I do, I don't simply look at heart rate. I look at functional status. If you walk 15 minutes on Bruce protocol, I don't care what your heart rate is, you're in good shape.
Absolutely.
So I mean, you have to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, just the heart rate and this, that, and the other. You got to look at all the marbles on the table.
Yeah.
Dr. Batiste, what are your thoughts on that?
Listen, I absolutely agree. I think your functional capacity is the king as it relates to stress testing in terms of prognosis. It's been shown and validated there. And there's so many different caveats on the individual basis as to whether or not it's time to proceed with additional testing or not based upon your clinical picture. So it's hard to say definitively if it's good or bad for you to have it, but I agree wholeheartedly in terms of what my application of the use of the stress test in terms of interpretation and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, I got to say that Dr. Montgomery's laugh is up there with Dr. Mills. There's going to be a close race. So here's a question from both of you. There is so much going on now. Like it just drives me crazy that this is even controversial, but oil. And, Dr. Goldhammer used to say to me that when you're a hammer, you see everything as a nail. And so because most of the people I work with are overweight and want to lose weight, I look at everything from the lens of calorie density. And so I look at oil as not so much whether it's healthy or not healthy, but it is so calorically dense that I have never really met a person that was able to lose weight and keep it off eating oil. It's 4,000 calories a pound. It has no fiber. It has no nutrients, no vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants. And my feeling has always been that if there is something in oil or any refined food that is beneficial, it would be in the whole food. So eat the olive, not the olive oil, eat the flaxseed, not the flaxseed oil. But there is a slew of younger plant-based doctors, many of them cardiologists, that are basically saying it's good and that they don't think that the evidence shows that it really does injure the endothelial and that, we shouldn't be bashing oil. But man, I have seen miracles happen to people in terms of heart disease and diabetes reversal and weight loss when they stop eating it. So I'm wondering if you guys could both weigh in on the oil controversy.
Yeah. I have a similar thought as yours. And the thing is that it's we don't advocate the use of oil. The exception is probably, the exception is when we're using vitamin D supplementation, which we recommend a lot to get patients. And the liquid vitamin Ds, or even the ones in capsular form, typically are dissolved, being that vitamin D is fat soluble in an oil, sometimes olive oil and the like. So with that exception aside, we strongly recommend our patients stay away from oils. But it as you point out, an isolated food. So in that respect, it's not the whole food, and so that's an initial disadvantage. And I think the other disadvantage of oil, compared to, let's say, an extracted juice, which you can have a healthy extracted juice. Now that's another debate. I'll get to that later. But I think the extracted oil is far more problematic, largely because of the instability of that fat outside of its normal environment. So, you have this whole concept of first cold press, blah, blah, blah. The regulation of that labeling of first cold press, from what I've heard and known, is problematic. It's not very stringent. So what's labeled first cold press may not be first cold press. That's one. Two, if it is first cold press in the most pristine manner possible, there's a shelf life that has to be there, and a time where you're opening and closing the bottle, where air is getting in there into the bottle. There's light maybe getting into the bottle if it's not, it's not an adequate, bottle. So there's some environmental insults to those oils, and they become rancid very rapidly. And so they can be very damaging. And not to mention if you're cooking with it. I mean, that's the pristine cold pressed oil that's raw on your salad, et cetera, et cetera. And that in of itself is problematic. If you're cooking the oil, then all bets are off. It's a major problem in terms of what effects it can have on your body. We have not looked at oil in isolation in our clinical studies. So I'm not going to say that, hey, I've got all this data on oil. What I can say anecdotally is in our patients who will come in and they're eating a plant-based diet, frequently we remove the oil. It's not only the weight, because we have a good number of skinny people who are sick. I have patients who complain about the weight loss. So I don't talk about weight loss when I talk about health, because I have a patient who's a patient in her 80s with some lung issues and heart issues. She's thin and she's complained about her weight loss. She's doing great in terms of plant-based, et cetera, but I have to be careful, and we have to have her eat certain foods. I don't have her eat oils, but we expand her feeding hours. I don't have her do time restricted. We expand her feeding, do other things to maintain her weight. So, but when patients add oil, what we notice other than weight is blood pressure going up, inflammation going up, and other things going awry. So yes, it's calorie dense and people have a hard time losing weight, but people also, in our experience, anecdotally, have a hard time getting better with the oils. And so I think it's not just the calories, but the poison. Cyanide is low in calories and low in carbs and low in fat, but it's poison. So I treat a drop of oil like a drop of cyanide. And so that's my thought on there. Dr. Batiste.
Yeah, I think when it comes to these studies and what folks are looking at, I think one thing that becomes very important is understanding what question is being asked or what research theory is being proposed, because otherwise it's difficult to extrapolate that fully into every circumstance. And so many of these studies, like the one in particular that is probably most cited and has garnered a lot of the attention, there was a recent study out of Journal of American College of Cardiology, and it was looking at the nurses' health study and physicians' health study and kind of looking at totality of patients or individuals of just shy of 100,000. But it was really more of a comparative. It was comparing to other oils. It was not answering the question of how is olive oil compared to no oil? How is olive oil compared to no oil? It's really about, typically it's in the form of a replacement. And so looking in the form of a replacement, they showed astronomically benefits in terms of cardiovascular and cancer mortality, comparing it to those substitutes of like fats, mayonnaise and butter and lard and things of that nature there. But when you're asking the specific question of oil versus no oil, and are there ramifications for it, we haven't seen that head-to-head comparison like that. Not, at least I haven't seen that published in that particular context. So I think the question that's being asked is extremely important, and understanding where you're meeting the patient. For myself, when I meet patients where they're at, I have historically advised them to utilize no oil. But that, in all honesty, depends on where the patient is at. right? Because I recognize that some patients are not there. They're at 3 trips to the Golden Arches every single day. And so my approach towards them, yes, I tell them that the marathon is 26.2 miles, but my starting point for them is going to someone else and running that marathon and reaching the goals. And so it will vary. And so it may vary, but ultimately I kind of outline, is it health promoting beyond a shadow of a doubt? Or is it disease promoting? Or is it where you're thinking it's somewhat skeptical? And so I utilize tools like that as I'm discussing concepts with patients in detail. And once again, honing in on what their ultimate goal is. The goal is total health. And if your goal is total health, then you have to go totally in. And so in order to achieve that, so that's my response with that.
Right. Well, it's not some superfood that if we're not eating it, we should all be rushing to add into our diet.
Yeah.
I love that laugh.
No, I don't think it's a superfood.
No.
You know, I like the fact that Dr. Batiste talked about the study, because oftentimes people get confused. You get one expert saying, well, the science here says such and such. And you really need to get into the nuts and bolts of what that science they're talking about, because all studies are not equal and they don't all point in the same direction. And the comments on the study you mentioned, the comparative study, you have to figure out, okay, how these studies are being carried out. And so the fact that an oil was being substituted for something that's more horrendous is sort of like saying, more people, when you stab people in the chest as opposed to shoot them in the head, more people survive. Well, okay, you don't recognize that in the chest. It's just that it's not as lethal as shooting them in the head. And so that's a comparative study between two things that you do to a person. But then say, okay, stabbing in the chest is good for you because we did the study, and compared to being shot in the head, that was a better survival.
Yeah, and this one was just like just reporting out like my dietary recall, which many of our nutritionally based studies are dietary recall. It was dietary recall in terms of it. And one of the things, and Dr. Montgomery mentioned this, is that what I find, especially in communities of urban centers and so forth, is there's a lot of fried food, which means high boiling temperatures, high heats that are reused, and it increases that oxidative stress, and that becomes worrisome. And you look at the mountains of volume of the substance that's ingested from those practices of food preparation, as well as even when they're at restaurants, and so soaking. And so it warrants still a large degree of caution, even for those who are seeking to embrace it. They still need to be extremely cautious in their approach.
Thank you. That was a great analogy. So here's a fun question from Randy. Both of you gentlemen have pretty unique first names. I've never met a person named Baxter before, or Columbus. Is there any story behind your names?
I would say Baxter is a much more common name than Columbus. but I'm named after my father, and my father was like the last of, I believe it was 10 kids.
Oh, wow.
And so one of his eldest siblings, they were studying Christopher Columbus in history, and they said, well, we name him Columbus, and that's all she wrote. And so he was a very proud man, and so I became the second. Now the interesting part of this story, and my son may not like this, is that at the time, and my wife, when my son was about to be born, my wife said, my dad wasn't doing well, and he was towards the end of his life. And my wife said, I'm gonna name him after you and your dad, because your dad is so proud of the name and you and everything of that sort. So, okay, that's fine. I wasn't too keen either way. And so at the end, she said, no, I'm not going to name him Columbus. She said, I kind of wonder why your name was Columbus when we got together. And so I think I'm gonna give him his own destiny and so forth. Fast forward 10 years, my son basically, after many, many times of asking and inquiring, said basically he wanted to change his name. I didn't do it, didn't change his name. He was so upset at that time. And finally we relented and changed his name. And he wanted to be Columbus III. So, fast forward 11 and a half years, my son, who was born Bryce Colin Batiste, is now Columbus Dennis Batiste III. So
wow, that is a story.
Yes.
Is there a nickname though? Does everyone call you Columbus, or like?
My dad is from the South and despised nicknames. He was a master of language. and he despised nicknames because there were many relatives and friends he never knew their their real name.
That's amazing. My story is fairly short. My parents, and this is hearsay, but my understanding is my parents, they had an agreement that my mom would name the girls, my dad would name the boys. And of course, in those days, I didn't know until the day of birth. And and I'm the third of three kids. And so when I was born, my mom called my dad. He was at work. He wasn't at the hospital. He was at work. So it was a boy. So what do you want to name him? And so they're on the phone, and my dad said, name him Baxter D. Montgomery. And my mother didn't really like that. She wanted Dexter. And so they got back and forth, a little bit of back and forth discussion or argument, however you want to describe it. And my dad's last words, you either name him that or don't bring him home. And so, so that was, and if you knew my dad, you would understand that to be the case. But anyway, but that's a little story there. And my son, my only son is Baxter D. Montgomery Jr. So anyway, hopefully you'll have other sons and we'll have a Baxter the third and so on.
Those are both great stories. Love it. You guys are just too much fun. Thank you so much. This has been just a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate you both being here.
Well, thanks for having us. It's been a pleasure. It's all mine.
Yeah. And we are not done with the special week honoring Black History Month. Dr. Columbus Batiste will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific time for a wonderful guest who we briefly met on Zoom once, but we don't know much about him, and I can't wait to learn more. His name is Dr. Bobby Price. So we'll see you all tomorrow, and be well, everyone. Take care. Good night.
Take care.
Take care.